The history of Entracte kind of precedes the band. So I first picked up a guitar at the very beginning of 1979, and I began working with bass player Paul. We were pretty abysmal, but by 1980 we'd gained a degree of proficiency, and that band split, and then I began working with Paul again, and by this time I discovered Ludus, and I dragged Paul along to see Ludus at the Lyceum. Paul loved them also, and so we began not following, but we began a friendship with the band, so to speak. Then when Graham was evicted, Graham being the percussionist who we discovered as our friendship grew, lived in London, where Ludus were Manchester born and based, we began working with Graham. We tried out a couple of vocalists, and Sharon came along. There was a keyboard player also, but he bowed. And we worked in as a four-piece up until, it's hard to remember the dates exactly, but I think towards the end of 1984, and sadly Paul decided to depart and committed suicide. And so we then began work on another project called Alternative Hawaii. Unfortunately, due to two of the members being Japanese students, their visas expired and they went back to Japan, and we then we never parted with Graham, but he was doing his thing, we were doing ours. And we then began working with Graham again, and that's when we renamed ourselves Entracte, and we carried on through various incarnations in sound up until our ending in 1990. The end was never bad, we just went off to do other things really. Musically, Entracte was very much my project, and I don't say this with any kind of ego. I'd kind of fallen out of love with what had been post-punk, thought it was awfully boring, thought most of the UK music of the mid-late 80s pretty boring. I always, coming through the whole punk thing in the 70s, I always saw punk as the end of rock and roll, and very soon realised it was just another way to perpetuate it. Mick Jones, rock and roll Mick. His guitar is everything about the guitar that I hate, personally. No, forgive me, but it just is. I was really influenced by Japanese electronica at that time, particularly an outfit called Guernica and a wonderful female artist called Miharu Koshi, and also one member of the Yellow Magic Orchestra, a guy called Haruomi Hosono. And just for those who don't know, Guernica was a project which intended to combine Japanese and European pop music together. This is around 1981, 82. Guernica's music formed a soundtrack for me for the entire decade, and I can still listen to those works now, and they're absolutely timeless. Outside of that, I was a great fan of 50s exotica and lounge musics, so people like Martin Denny and Les Baxter, and I think that some of the Eastern themes that we pursue in the later works, I think, are very much soundscapes drawn from the influences I felt from those records. And as time passed and Graham discovered synths, he was actually able to bring in a whole different edge. It's quite interesting to hear the grooves that he was exploring with Entracte compared to what he did later on as a solo artist, as Gagarin, which was very much more ambient music focused. We had an ambience, but we were not ambient, if that makes sense. It was just very much something that happened in the confines of four people working for a long period of time in an enclosed space. My form teacher at school was also the art teacher of that school, and he said to me, "You should stay on and go to art school." And sure enough, I could have done it. I would have got grants to do that. All I wanted to do was to go out and get a job. Not because I wanted to work, but because I wanted money. And had I stayed on, I think I would have probably not been able to partake in the whole punk thing of 76, 77 into 78 that was so important and so formative for me of my experiences that I even live through today. John helped me greatly on that sense because that man changed the whole direction of punk. Now, the two great drummers or percussionists of punk were Kenny and Palmolive, because they did not follow that convention. And it's because on those two albums that Kenny made, he's not following those conventions. That's where the accolades coming from, isn't it? And my first time to experience the Slits was a double bill with the Banshees. And Palmolive was a phenomenal drummer. The only thing where you could tell that this was a song and not a complete ramshackle discordance was that Palmolive started off this thumping two-tonic rhythm. Boom, 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 boom. And each song had its own distinctive rhythm. And I loved it. It's this cat wailing noise. It's great. It's great. And people are saying, what? This is shit. This isn't punk. The Sex Pistols, the Clash are punk. And I'm thinking, this is more punk than you fuckers will ever know. Because this is for women being women. They're not attempting to emulate anything that these guys are doing. They're just being themselves. And that was the importance of them, and I felt. None of us in our approach were conventional in that sense. We were never going out and looking to get signed. At the same time, what really happened with things, Graham was so busy. He was always in demand for just about everybody and their dog. And so we were always perpetually on the back burner, so to speak. We would rehearse once a week when other constrictions allowed. Michael Way had a brief interest in our first demos as Entracte. And then we played him some more stuff and he didn't like that, and that was kind of typical Michael Way, show an interest and then, oh, I'm off on something else now, so don't bother me. And we, I think, had a meeting with someone at 4AD, but we didn't tick their box either. Richard Boone at Rough Trade, no, don't come back. So that was that. And the more we got rejected, the more I felt it devalued what we were doing. When we did go out, we were tight and we were very well received. But again, Graham had the chance to get us bookings, but if we were going to get bookings, I had to be the one to go out and get them. And then I just said, enough. London was filthy, London was dirty, and London was fun. It had a heart, and I no longer feel like this city has a heart. Maybe I'm saying this just because I'm old and wizened, but maybe it's because, in my opinion, the city no longer has a heart. We all value the experiences that we knew of the past. And change can't be prevented. But I think in one way we're able to absorb sounds and styles from all over the world. It used to be so hard for me to try to find, for example, those Japanese artists I spoke about earlier. Now anybody can go onto YouTube and find them and find their entire back catalogue without even spending a penny. But at the same time, it's too easy. I hope that those photos, in a way, show London in its tatty state. Certainly, the London of that time really appealed to Hisano as well. The kind of disintegrating Victorian buildings and tenements of stuff so much of which no longer exists. It's sad. Manchester at that time was so grim. First of all, Paul and I, we saw Ludus play at the Lyceum. Then a few days later, they played at a tiny little club called the 101 Club in Clapham Junction. And we went to that and we bonded with the band. We didn't know at that point Graham lived in Balham. And so then we said, where's your next show? Oh, it's at Rafters in Manchester next Wednesday. And so we travelled up to Manchester and we slept on the floor in Linda's kitchen. And that was the beginnings of a relationship with them. At one point, Paul did an audition being bassist. Ludus never had a permanent bassist. Linda used to play bass. They used to go out as a trio. And Linda, actually, I always felt was an amazing bassist, because to sing like Cleo Lane and play a bass was no easy thing. And so Paul auditioned, and they promptly said, no, we're not going to use you. And although we continued working together, he separated from the Ludus equation at that point, leaving just myself and Graham. And then when Graham was evicted, I continued with Ludus, because by that time I was in a brief relationship with Linda's younger sister. I used to basically stay at 35 Mayfield Road, which is where that was the Ludus encampment, if you like. And we used to go to the Hacienda. That's in the days, not when the Hacienda was a super club, but when nobody went. You'd go on a Saturday night and there'd be about 30 people in this big, huge aircraft hangar-sized space. We'd met Morrissey on that first visit up to Rafters. And I went to another couple of subsequent shows at Rafters and got to know him. And so Linda, Stephen as he was then, Jeanette and I would go out to I can't think of the name of the anyway, big gay club, but yeah. And then I decided that it wasn't going to work between me and Jeanette, and so that was that. And Linda and I parted ways and didn't see each other for the best part of 30 years. And things got back in touch when I was asked to go along to the Frieze Art Fair, by which time she was megatastically famous, and interview her for Resonance FM. And our friendship, lovely friendship, Linda's wonderful, was rekindled there. So, well, I didn't think anyone would be interested. Entracte fizzled out 91, some point in 91. And even when Entracte was happening, you'd kind of move on to the next song. So we might record something, stick it in the shoebox under the bed, there you go, it's gone. Locked in the safe deposit shoebox of history. What are we now, 96, 94, June 94, Graham passed. I was friends with Graham right up to the last few months of his life. I also worked with Graham. I did graphic design for his website, for a few of his CDs as Gagarin, for flyers and this sort of stuff. So once he passed, I kind of didn't have great memories of Entracte. I didn't think there was much worth revisiting, but I did think there's a couple of songs that I'd like to hear again, and one of those being Shifting Views. I intended just to make a few MP3s, give them to them, and they're souvenirs for them. What, however, transpired was I'm thinking, wow, actually, this is really interesting. This is really quite good. And the more I pursued things, I thought, okay, let me throw these at a few musician friends and get their obs on them. And they said, no, these are really good. You should. And lo and behold, I approached 3 labels, and one of whom being yourselves, and all 3 came back positive, and I decided that it would be really nice to work with you guys, and there we go. And thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to get our music heard after such a long time, and for having faith in what we did so many years ago. Seriously, thank you. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about Pickpocket. Okay, so the story of Pickpocket et moi. Right, so I was at work one day, and at that time I was working in a warehouse and doing awful things, and the phone went for me, and it was Linda. Hello, we're just down the road from you, we're in Clapham Junction, we're going to record, do you want to come along? Oh yeah. So I promptly got half a day's leave, went off and spent the next few hours with the trio in the studio, and they recorded all of those songs in an afternoon. They hadn't begun when I got there, which would have been around noon, and they were done by 5. And that's pretty good going, I would say, because I think it's incredibly tight. They used to rehearse, actually. Ludus, when Graham was with them, when they were down in London, they would rehearse in the same room that became the Entracte rehearsal studio and recording studio. And the other thing about Pickpocket, Richard might disagree, and I would say, nah, I know the truth. He was looking at doing something which resembled Bow Wow Wow's My Cassette Pet, which was a little cassette in a cardboard box. So this was the new Hormones equivalent. You got a booklet, you got a badge, and I put the badges in. I told you, I've got the secret, you just need to unlock them.